Testing, testing.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of February 2nd, 2022. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge we're meeting today on the ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples. Looking like a fairly standard agenda today, so hopefully we'll get everyone home who's not at home before the snow starts. So I will turn to the first item on the agenda, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is approval of the agenda.
Okay, moved. Seconded. Any discussion, any additions or changes? No? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is adoption of the minutes. Item M1 is the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Jan 13th, and the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of January 13th, 2022 be adopted.
Yes, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, Ms. Harrison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item M2, and the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of January 19th, 2022 be adopted.
Moved, seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. No, Director Morrison. That was just moving or seconding?
Opposing the last set of minutes.
Okay, one opposed. Thank you. The next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is public input, and we have no applications at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on.
The next item before you is correspondence, item C1. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to Cowichan Estuary Nature Center Society to support community programs.
That's been moved. We have a seconder. Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is C2, and it's another grant and aid for Electoral Area D. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to Cowichan Secondary School for 2 bursaries for 2 graduating students that reside in Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, to support their future education and training.
Moved, seconded, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Harrison, next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item C3. It's a grant and aid request for Electoral Area D. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to the RCMSAR 34 Marine Rescue Society to support the Boat Lift 2022 and the Fast Response Craft Replacement 2027.
Moved, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is information, and there are 2 information items. Item 1 is the Electoral Area F, Cowichan Lake South, Scotts Falls Advisory Planning Commission minutes of February 23rd, 2021, and these were referred back to the Electoral Area F Advisory Planning Commission at the November 3rd, 2021 Electoral Area Services Committee meeting for further review. And item 2 are the Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora Community Parks Advisory Commission minutes of November 25th, 2021, and both those items are for information.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on either of those two items? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DP21B20 for 1812 Elford Road, PID 004434311, and the applicant is in the room.
Great, thank you. And I also see a presentation up there. Does that be Mr. Tippett?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it will, and thank you to Sheila for filling in so ably for my, shall we say, technological challenge of not being able to do it. This is an application essentially to renew a development permit that had been issued in 2019. The development permit has a new number, however, and the former number you can see there on the cover slide. So Sheila, if you could move to the next one, please. Subject property is on Elford in Shawnigan Village area, and it's a proposed 2-lot subdivision. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here the proposed layout, and what you can note on the layout is the kind of red text with the red arrow points to the areas that would be impervious. It's an approximation of where driveways would be for both of the proposed parcels, and then the retained green space, aka permeable ground, would be shown in the green and the sort of hatching pattern on the map. So the report, I hope, lays out the facts in a fairly clear fashion for the committee. And what I'll essentially say is the former guidelines that were present in the recently repealed community plan would still apply in this case. And because there's been no substantial change to the proposal in the last 2 years, the recommendation is to proceed as per the report. So if there are any questions, thank you. I'll be very happy to try and answer any questions. Otherwise, there is the recommendation from staff.
Okay, thank you. So if we could take that presentation down, we'll see if there's any questions. Yes, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment that I'll save for later, but I guess my question is, there's some community interest in the right-of-way for Heald Road, and I'm curious, or I guess I'd like to be able to refer, not like go ahead today, however we're going to proceed, but I would like to just have this application sent to the Parks Commission just for information so that they're aware of the development, and the ability to mark Heald Road as a bit of a connection between neighborhoods is really important. And I'd like for the owner of the property to be aware of, that is of interest to community. So to not start, building outside of the lines, don't color outside the lines in that area. I guess that's it for now. Thanks. Would that be possible?
Thank you. So Mr. Tippett, did you get that question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I mean, we can certainly, refer this proposal to Parks and Trails Division. And I don't know whether Brian Farquhar is attending this meeting. If he was, perhaps he could comment, but certainly that would be no problem.
Okay.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Just
Go ahead, Director Smith. Go ahead, please. Oh, I see. It was Ms. Harrison. Sorry, I thought you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to reiterate, the applicant, Rick Coles, is in the meeting room here if you have questions that you would like to address to him.
Yes, okay. I was going to turn to the applicant as soon as we're finished with questions for staff. So, Director Smith?
Thank you. Through the chair to staff. I noticed in the application summary that it indicates that this application is being reviewed under the old OCP and not our new HOCP bylaw 4270. If this was reviewed under 4270, would there be anything that would be different than the way it's being reviewed under the old OCP? Thank you.
Mr. Tibbet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Short answer is yes, there are some additional requirements, different processes, and staff is currently taking a comprehensive look at those to make sure that these differences are appropriate, and we're engaged in the middle of that right now. On this particular application, though, I think the report kind of sets out the sequence of events. The permit was issued, it was almost about to expire. The applicant came in just before it did expire and applied for renewal. We discussed it vis-a-vis our transitional policy that we have in respect of that were submitted prior to adoption of the harmonized OCP. This one didn't quite fit into that, but we concluded following a thorough staff discussion that it was most appropriate to carry on under the old rules, particularly given that we're in the middle of doing, I guess, working on some fine tuning of the new rules. Substantially, what would be required would probably be a couple of new reports. One example would be, I don't know if this was a riparian site or not, actually. I don't recall off the top of my head, but there's been some changes even to the legislation, like the riparian areas regulation became the riparian areas protection regulation, and there are certain differences there. So our conclusion was that it was most appropriate to do it under the former rules, which after all were in place just until I guess mid-October last year.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up, Director Smith?
Yes, so you're indicating that there's a policy to bridge applications like this that are now ending and then being renewed. Is that, do we have the policy to show us that information? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we don't have a policy that is specific to this situation. What we have is a policy, or I think it's actually incorporated into an actual bylaw that states that if an application for a development permit was made prior to the date of adoption of the harmonized OCP, that development permit application could be continued for a period of up to 1 year, issued within that year, subject to the old rules. And so what we did is because this situation didn't fit neatly into that existing scenario that was anticipated, we, as I say, had a staff discussion, and it was concluded that there would be no public benefit in proceeding to require resubmission of all of this information under the new regime, and the decision was taken to propose it as a renewal.
Okay, thank you. Is that good for now, Director Smith? Thank you. So any other questions for staff? So Ms. Harrison, did you say we have the applicant in the room, or you will bring him?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the applicant is in the room. We just have to set him up at the podium for him to participate.
Oh, please do then.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's talking. Hello, everybody. I'm not sure what I can say other than thank you for looking at this and hopefully taking it forward. We were caught up basically with a delay of almost a full year by the water commissioner delaying it through COVID and just the bureaucracy. They changed the rules on the water system partway through the application, and basically we've just been tied up in the provincial slowness of the whole thing, and I'd just like to take this forward and be able to work with what you guys approved today, if possible.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? No, it sounds like all clear from here. So thanks very much for coming in, and we'll carry on. So, Director Acton?
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation, but I'd also like to speak to it.
Okay, it's been seconded, so go ahead, Director Acton.
Yeah, and so I don't think that this application is an opportunity to make an example of what of where we are with sewer. It's unfortunate that our OCP was written with the thought that we would have sewer by now. So we have these developments happening. These are like 0.2 lots, and because they're hooked up to city water, that's the only requirement, and they're able to subdivide. And meanwhile, in the community, we have some larger developments that want to happen, and we're telling them, no, you can't just service yours. You need to be part of the solution. And I think it takes a whole community, even the small developments, being part of the solution. And in this case, it's not. But I'd like to propose that we accept this proposal today. But I do have a following motion to propose to committee after we've voted.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the recommendation that we have moved and seconded? No? Okay, I'd like to call the question on that, please. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And I'll turn to Director Acton.
Thank you. So I've had a few conversations with staff because, as mentioned, this is something that's not pushing our community forward. It's actually pushes us back, because the more small systems that go ahead and don't tie up in the future to our future sewer system that we will have one day, makes it even more of a challenge. So speaking to staff, I've come up, they have suggested a resolution. I'll read it for you today. It's that staff report back to committee for options for interim zoning amendments that would support a future community sewer system. And I would like to move that.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Do we have a seconder? Seconded? Okay, so any further discussion? Okay, I'll see Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an interesting suggestion, this one, in motion, and I'm going to vote in favour of it. But I have to ask for clarity from staff. This is not for Shawnigan Area B only. This would cover the whole of our CVRD areas. Is that correct?
Mr. Tibbet?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't speak for the director who made the motion. I suspect she expected it only to apply to Shawnigan Village. I think the issue in question is really specific to Shawnigan Village because of the fact that our engineering staff and planning staff have been working together kind of hand in hand to try and resolve the community sewer issue. And so I expect it's only Area B, but you should check with the director, please.
Yeah, the reason for a follow-up, please, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
The reason I'm asking is because Area C is also in the process of building our own sewer systems here as well, and part of which has had to be curtailed, the extension, because of rising costs, and it won't be as extensive as it was originally planned, even though I've put $340,000 of CWF funding into this. So I would like to make a friendly amendment that includes not only, or rather doesn't exclude the other areas, because I am facing the same situation here where a plan to extend into a build out cannot be achieved because of the rising costs and the unavailability of materials to build that. But the intent is to connect into what we can do when it becomes available. So I do think it's a little bit restrictive that we only have Shawnigan Lake in there. So I would like to make a friendly amendment so that it would include other areas as appropriate as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. So Director Acton, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I don't know if Mr. Tippett could comment, because I'm not familiar with what's happening in Area C, but what's happening in Area B is just like this application, we're having development that probably shouldn't be happening. Is that what's happening there, Director Wilson? So it's happening and they're just creating their own, they're using their own system instead of tying up to the city system?
Yes and no. Let me go backwards into history here, and I'm sure you recall that
Point of
there
order,
was a
Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay, let's not discuss this. Personally, there are problems with this particular one having only Area B in there. I would like, please, to include other areas so that we can meet the problems as they arise, and they are arising.
Okay, well,
So maybe just Mr. Tippett could include just a paragraph on how that would apply to other areas, or I don't know. Anyway.
Okay, well, we'll have to see several other people now, so we'll go to Director Smith and then Director Kuhn.
I had a point of order.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Director Morrison, your point of order, please.
My point of order is that the initial resolution put forward by Director Acton was a report about zoning for the Shawnigan Village area. It seems very distinct from what Director Wilson was asking for, and I thought everybody knew that there's no such thing as a friendly amendment under the rules of order that we follow. So I think it'd be more than appropriate if we're doing a small report on zoning for Shawnigan Village, that's a separate and distinct enough resolution that we can address that on its own merit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll carry on. We'll go to Director Smith and Director Kuhn.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification by Director Morrison. I think that this does bring up a bit of an additional topics for all electoral areas. So I'm not sure that we're dividing out one when we should be having a more fulsome look at it. But I think that that's through our modernization, and maybe Coralie or Miss Breen could answer that as part of the question right now.
I see Miss Breen. Not sure if she's available right at the moment. There we are.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we could extend the analysis to all electoral areas, particularly given that that's our current focus, is looking at the growth containment boundaries. So that analysis could be conducted.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
To answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we get a motion to that effect, please?
All right, so so we have on the floor right now the original motion. Are you saying, should we deal with that first, or can we amend it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. If you would like to include all electoral areas, that should be an amendment voted on, and then the original motion as amended.
Okay, so I think I see Director Wilson, you're probably wanting to move the amendment to all areas?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and that was my original intent, and I apologize for using you the word friendly, because that's what I thought I was being here, and opposed to not friendly. Yeah, I would like to move that. Thank you.
Okay, now Director Kuhn, were you seconding that?
No, I'm against the amendment because.
Okay, hold on, Director Kuhn. Let's just see. Do we have a seconder for Director Wilson's amendment? Okay, Director Smith. Go ahead, Director Kuhn.
Yes, if the director of Area C wants to have its area included, then he can do that. I don't want my area included in that.
Okay, well, we now have the motion to include all areas, so that's the discussion for now on the amendment. Director Acton.
Yeah, I'm fine either way, whichever, but staff made it clear with me that it was something that could be done really easily just for Shawnigan, and that is actually where we have a huge amount of growth happening. And I didn't want to add to to a growing report. But if it's all the same, you know, I would support the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to be included in this. We've got work underway with the modernized official community plan and the zoning, and like, this is just another layer. I understand the intent of what Director Acton was after. Simple motion, do a quick look at I think the work is already underway, and a motion is superfluous to what we're doing here. I will support Director Acton's resolution for her area, but I won't support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is on the amendment, so I have Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I think this is really interesting because it really points out that we're dealing with an HOCP now, a harmonized official community plan. And I think the community in general would be expecting some consistency in our regulations and so forth. And we also will be talking tomorrow, I think, about urban containment boundaries. And we are always told that urban containment boundaries really are about where we are able to provide servicing. And it strikes me that we're in a position where we have a bunch of proposed urban containment boundaries without a lot of servicing at present. So if we really want those urban containment boundaries in the next 20 years, it seems to me we have to get extremely serious about servicing. So I think the idea that Director Acton floated is probably a really appropriate one at this time. And we all need to work together to make sure that any other areas in the region, in electoral areas in our harmonized plan, are looked at if it's appropriate to look at them, and I'm sure staff would do that. So I would very much be in support of the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further comments on that, I would call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, so motion carries. Thank you. So we'll go back to the original, the amended motion. Could we hear that, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That staff report back to committee on options for interim zoning amendments for Shawnigan Village, for all electoral areas, future development.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
That was not it completely. It's that for interim zoning amendments that would support a future community sewer system.
Okay. So that, Ms. Harrison, you have that? Okay, so that ending has been changed. Okay, any further discussion?
Well, Director Morrison, sorry, it was chuckling about that. So if you see,
that's all right.
Is there an issue there?
We'll leave that. Any further discussion? No? Okay, I'd like to call the question on that, please.
Can you just read the question again, totally, because it's sort of been fragmented.
Okay, one more time, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll try it one more time. That staff report back to committee on options for interim zoning amendments for a plan for future community sewer services in all electoral areas.
Okay, everyone's clear on that? I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? 3 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. So we will move on to the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R2. It's a report from the Development Services Division regarding application numbers DP21C11 and SA21C04 for 940 Judson Road, PID 000560308, And the applicant, Ryan Powell, is in the lobby. I'll just admit him.
Okay, thank you. And I see we have a presentation from Ms. Herrera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so this application is for the property at 940 Judson Road. Okay, it's not advancing now. Oh, there we go. Okay, this is in Electoral Area C. And so the report before you does relate to a subdivision application and a development permit on this property. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the property into 4 lots, which will be connected to community water as well. And a new road will be constructed into the property in a cul-de-sac formation for all the proposed lots to have frontage on the public road. Staff have no concerns with the application, and the DP is recommended for approval. And the other 2 matters that relate to the subdivision and not directly to the DP relate to parcel frontage and park dedication. So you'll see that those are also included in the recommendation. And staff is recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will turn to the committee if there are any questions on this one. Director Smith.
Thank you. I was just wondering, this goes to Modi for final approval of the subdivision. Have they expressed any concerns about emergency access in and out of that subdivision with only the one access in for the 4 lots there?
Herrera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not aware of any concerns. That might be something the applicant, though, however, may have had conversations with the ministry about. We don't often get all of their detailed comments around the road configuration.
Okay, thank you. Well, this may be a good time to invite the applicant into the room, Ms. Harrison.
I think I'm
Thank
here.
you, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
The applicant is in the room. Mr.
Great,
Ryan
welcome.
Powell?
Yes.
Yeah, welcome, sir.
Hi, everybody.
Did you hear that question that Director Smith just posed?
I didn't actually. I just caught the end that there were no concerns, but I might have some, so I didn't know what the actual question was. If you could read,
Directors.
be great.
Thank you. Maybe Director Smith could just repeat it briefly.
Thank you. I was just wondering if Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure had expressed any concerns about emergency in and out of that area and road clearing and that type of information with regards to the one road in accessing the 4 lots. Thank you.
There have been no safety concerns raised. They have the engineered plans for the road. We have spoken to several people at the ministry, including their engineers. There were no safety concerns raised. The only thing that they asked us when we drew the road was that the cul-de-sac be able to do a turnaround for a fire truck and that there was a hydrant there. So those are drawn into the plans, and they're happy with the radius and everything there. So no other concerns have been raised.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Director Smith? No? Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'll turn to the director for the area.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this looks all in order, and I thank Director Smith for the question there. It's very relevant. I would like to move option 1, please, as per the staff recommendation, if I have a seconder.
Seconded. Okay, so Director Wilson, you're only wanting to move option 1 at this point?
Option 1, yes, please. That's the one that the staff are recommending.
Okay, I do see 2 and 3 are also on the
It's option one, which is the first one, which seems to be
Okay,
more
well,
comprehensive. But however, having said that, it may be worthwhile just asking Ms. Herrera if that is, my understanding is that's the most comprehensive and that is the most favoured. Is that correct, if I'm reading this report correctly?
Yes, option one includes 3 points to it, and it is the recommended resolution. Thank you.
That's what I affected. Yeah, so I'd like to move that. I noticed that Director Smith has already seconded it.
Yes, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we'll turn to the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R3. It's a report from the Water Management Division regarding Shell Beach Water System first stage review. And there is a 4-point recommendation before you.
Okay, thank you. So I see Mr. Dennison has popped up. Do we have any comments from you or presentation?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say that the Shell Beach Water System is about 39 customers. They first came to us back in around 2013, and we did a initial feasibility study of take over the system in 2014. However, a moratorium was brought into place at that time, and so it was held in abeyance up until March of 2021, at which point in time we received a request from the customers of the system to reopen the consideration of takeover, and the board decided to lift our moratorium to authorize staff to investigate transfer and to allocate $10,000 from budget 130 of feasibility study funds to do a bit of engineering work, which we have completed. There are approximately $1 million, a little over $1 million of upgrades that have been costed out and recommended for the system to bring it up to standards. The available resources for that, the customers have about $50,000 in reserves that they would put forward to it. Community Works funds were assigned several rounds ago, and there's $230,000 there available, and then the customers would have to be responsible for the borrowing of another $760,000. Putting this all together, along with operational costs, we end up with a projected annual budget of $2,400 per year between parcel tax and user fee, of which about $1,150 would be debt and $1,250 operational costs. So that puts it right at the top of all of our existing 36 utilities. However, there's a couple mitigating issues here. One is that their fire suppression capacity does not meet standards. So we use the term decorative hydrants, so you can look at them, but you can't really use them. And some of the people there are paying up to $1,000 a month in fire insurance currently, because they're quite a distance from the fire hall. Yeah, that's a pretty stark number. So for them, paying those kinds of costs for fire insurance, these costs for the water system upgrades and operation by the CVRD is a much, much better deal. So they're pretty keen. Plus, their existing operator is aging out. He's done it for a number of years, and he is quite moving along in age and really doesn't want to continue anymore, and they don't have anybody else that's prepared to do it. So between those two factors, they're actually very keen to proceed. So they have requested to us to bring this forward, and they are prepared to bring a petition forward door to door and get the necessary sign-offs for proceeding for this. So we have the recommendations before you in order to proceed with the process, and the 4 points do that for us.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from Mr. Dennison? Seeing none, I'll turn to the director for the area. Director Martman.
Hi, thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank the Water Management Division team. They've included me in this process, and it's been quite a learning for me, as well as the transparency is really obvious between the CVRD and these homeowners and the users of this system. So thanks for that. They're looking forward to having this move along, and so I'd like to move the recommended resolution.
Thank you. I see a seconder. Okay. Director Smith, do you have a question?
I have concerns about adding another utility to the CVRD utilities department. We currently have, we're adding under a grant application for Shawnigan Lake North water system, other water systems. We have the Mill Bay connection of sewer systems that are being added. And we currently have many utilities that are under the CVRD jurisdiction that have concerns that the CVRD does not have the capacity to actually take on the responsibilities for some of the current utilities we already have. And this is disappointing to know that we have an issue in Saltaire with the Stocking Lake Dam, and the dam needs to be replaced. Saltaire water system's been with the CVRD since 1986. In 2018, an assessment was done on the dam. It's rated at high risk. And this is a project that should be under the CVRD jurisdiction. It includes the town of Ladysmith, and we're both under the CVRD, Saltaire and the town of Ladysmith. This is a project that should be managed under the CVRD, and yet I've been told that the CVRD staff doesn't have the capacity. So how is it we can add more and more, but we don't have the capacity for what we currently have responsibilities for? And I really would like to support this addition for this group, but I also feel that if we're not able to manage what we already have and take on those responsibilities, we're neglecting those customers that have been customers of the CVRD and taxpayers for multiple years. So I will not be supporting this motion at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dennis, I didn't know if there's a question. No, okay. That was a comment. I also saw Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think a first stage review of this system that's been waiting a long time is completely appropriate. I think there will be reporting back to this committee and the board their findings. I know that this has been a long-suffering group, and I do think that our engineering staff and water division staff are pretty amazing at the work they do. Just one point in regards to these types of reports, which we haven't had many of as of late. I'd like to just bring a point to staff that could they please include the financial prognostications around cost of borrowing and the likes for directors to be able to consider as part of our deliberations on this. I looked, I've since secured the information, but I think it should be naturally part of the report to give us an idea of the fiscal implications to residents as they consider this and as we consider giving this first stage approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Mr. Boyson has popped up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just to make a comment to that from the director. I completely agree. I think we will endeavor to have that type of information, make sure that the board can make correct decisions. You need to have all the information, so we'll work towards doing that in the future.
Very good, thank you. Director Nicholson.
Oh, you were reading my mind. I didn't know I had my hand up. But I would like maybe Mr. Boyson or Mr. Dennison to comment on the capacity issue, because I feel strongly that it's our role to try and do this kind of work if it's our policy to do so. But of course, we always are concerned about capacity issues at the moment, particularly with the difficulty of recruiting staff and so forth. So I am just wondering if they have any comments about that. Thank you.
Any comments from either staffer?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would be pleased, and I do really appreciate the concern of the directors. That's really good to hear, because it is challenging for sure. I would say at this point in time, there's several factors playing in. One is we do have a couple staff positions that Mr. Boyson is doing a marvelous job in bringing forward, and we hope to fill that coming up, and that will alleviate some of our stresses. With a matter like this, there's a lot of inside staff time to bring it to this point, and then if there's being upgrades done, once the upgrades are done, after that, then and the system's in good shape, then it's mostly just operational time. And I don't mean that in a just sense, but the operators look after running the system, and the system has been brought up to standards, and so we don't have the kinds of issues that we might involve a lot of inside staff time to try and solve. So that does help. Also, this particular utility is located just a couple kilometers from an existing utility we operate, Shellwood. And so any operating time, when they go out to Shellwood, they would carry on to Shell Beach and do works there as necessary for maintenance. Also, we have some successes coming up in terms of reducing our utility count, currently at 36. So for example, the Mill Bay project will incorporate 4 existing CVRD utilities into one, plus the other private partners, we call them, that are joining in. So that will actually reduce workload because there's one treatment system instead of 4. There's one set of parameters to report to Ministry of Environment, one budget, one everything instead of 4. So that kind of thing will help reduce the workload, and we have other utility joinings we're looking at as well in future. So hopefully that will actually reduce the workload, especially of inside staff. Yes, so I think those mitigating factors make it okay for us to proceed. We always feel that we can. We do this because we feel we can bring something to the table for these people. A lot of them despair of their situation, and there's almost nothing they can do. They just don't know what to do. And water and sewer utilities are getting very complex to operate, and a lot of lay people just can't do it. And so it has been, kind of our mission to help out where we can and try and solve these problems. So this is one that once the upgrades are done, it'll be tidied up and in good shape.
Okay, thank you. So Director Wilson, then I'll turn back to Director Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always a pleasure to hear Mr. Dennison's optimistic and very professional opinion on these things. It really is. Thank you, Mr. Dennison. One thing I heard you say, and if you could just clarify for me, please, that the present operator has done a lot of upgrades as per what the staff has asked for, or has he done them through basically, can you do this before we think about taking it over? He's made a lot of changes, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, they haven't. They've done a little bit here and there, but not too much. This $1 million would be borrowed on behalf of those customers, and we would carry out that work. So we would see that get done. A fair bit of it is for a reservoir replacement, and another big chunk of it is control equipment and that sort of thing that needs all replacing. And a lot of that sort of equipment is very expensive. So no, they haven't. They've done a little bit, and they've tried to done their best, to be honest. I mean, they are trying, but it is really difficult, and they're lay people, and they don't know all the intricacies of running a modern water system. So that would be coming with this. Yeah.
Yeah. If I could have a follow-up, please, Mr. Chair, just for my own information and clarity here.
Okay, and Director Wilson, I see Mr. Etherington's popped up. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. No. Okay. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, and that's good. That's great. And if I understand it correctly, the burden of the cost then would be purely on the users in this particular case. It's nodding the head. Good. That's good stuff. And also that the residents want this to go ahead. Is that correct as well?
Mr. Chairman, they are quite keen. Yeah, they've been knocking at our door for years. They were very disappointed when they had to wait. Through the waiting period. So now they're really keen to go ahead, and they keep asking us all.
Okay. All right.
When can this start? What do we have to do?
Right.
So they will take care of the petition. The other thing in this, we'll provide some information, but they're going to do that door to door. They're going to talk to their own people and say, this is something we really got to do. And I'm sure, when a lot of these homeowners consider the cost of their fire insurance versus the relatively low cost of the water system, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Mr. Dennison.
Great. Thank you. So I'll turn to Director Martin.
Thank you, Chair, and all good comments. But I'd just like to reiterate about this group of people. I mean, they've been here. I mean, they're longtime taxpayers. They're longtime residents, and as mentioned, they've been waiting a very long time. And the moratorium was placed, and when this was permitted last year to move ahead, I mean, that was really the time to say was a capacity there or not. But given that, the CBRD is committing through gas tax a large amount of money through this Area H gas tax for this, over $200,000 towards this, and that's the clock is ticking on those funds, and so this is a timely venture if it moves forward for those funds to get used within the allotted time. I think the last piece is really think about yourself having the decorative fire hydrants. I hadn't heard that term before, and that's a real concern. Not only about having a source of potable water, but having those fire hydrants that aren't going to provide anything for the fire department. And to put it in perspective, just to let you know, they're at the very far end of a long road that is about as far as you can get in our area from the fire department. So not only will the fire department show up and have no water source right now, they're going to be 15 minutes getting there alone. So, and I've talked to the chief about this, and the sooner that they can get some fire hydrants in place, the better it will be for that whole neighborhood down there. Anyways, I hope that the directors support moving this forward. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to move the recommendation, Director Martin?
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Second. Any further discussion? Does anyone need it read out? Please have it there before us. No, okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll turn to the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is R4, a report from the Inspections and Enforcement Division regarding the 2021 year-end Building Division report, and that is for information.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. McDonald, if anyone has any questions, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just pulling up attachment A, and I just want to congratulate our staff on the processing of what seems to be a fairly robust number of applications, and I can't recall in the time that I've been here Area F being so robust in the number of applications. These are numbers that, like I say, I don't think I've seen, which means that our staff are putting a lot of kilometers on during the course of their work. So these are pretty great numbers. I'm sure we've got additional revenues as a result, and just want to congratulate them for their fine work. And this is a great report from where I sit. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions for Mr. McDonald? Let's see. Yes, Director Acton.
Yeah, I haven't, sorry, just a quick question. I haven't received any feedback from the community of timeliness, but I know this was an issue in the past of just people waiting, feeling like they're waiting too long for applications to be processed and get even just small permits. How are things moving along at this time?
Mr. McDonald?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have Mr. Brisky also in this meeting, so I'm going to defer that question to him.
Okay, Mr. Brisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. Things are moving pretty well right now. We've had a really busy January. Historically, the winter is a little bit slower, but for simple projects, simple applications like decks and renovations and things like that, the turnaround time can be about maybe 2 to 3 weeks. But for some of our more complex projects, big subdivisions or commercial buildings or anything like that, we can sort of step into the 5 to 6 range. But certainly we're anticipating some increased volume in the spring, but certainly nothing like we had last year when the building had flooded there. So outlook is good right now, and things are moving the way we want them to. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Okay, there's those for information, so we'll move on then, Ms. Harrison, to the next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R5. It's a report from the Inspections and Enforcement Division regarding the 2021 year-end bylaw enforcement report. And again, that is for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Smith and then Director Acton.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I noticed that there's a total of 22 OCP complaints, and I just am wondering what types of OCP complaints they are. And I noticed that Area G scored very high under the fireworks, and I was just wondering if that was the Halloween timeframe or if it was another time of the year that occurred. And when it comes to unsightly, how much unsightly does it have to be before people actually bring it to your attention? Thank you.
Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report was put together by Mr. Harris, and I have him in this meeting, and I'm going to defer these questions to him.
Great. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To answer the director's question regarding OCP DPA, the majority of concerns and reports were associated with the riparian area development permit areas, followed by sensitive ecosystem protection and marine uplands and foreshore protection. So that's pretty much the majority of the calls as far as the OCP concerns. And then, sorry, what was the question regarding the fireworks?
I was just asking if Area G, we've scored quite high here, and I was just wondering if they were around the Halloween period or if it was other times of the year that these complaints, and I also had questions about how unsightly is unsightly. Thank you.
Okay. Through the chair, yeah, the majority of the fireworks complaints are always associated with Halloween typically, and the week building up to Halloween. Very few complaints are received as a result of New Year's Eve, and generally nothing around Canada Day because people are quite aware of fire restrictions at that time. As far as unsightly, it really comes down to how the complaint measures with the intent of the bylaw and the definitions within the bylaw. So, you know, unsightly can be a little subjective, and we walk into it, you know, unbiased, and we look at it as the bylaw is written. And if it appears there are violations or some concerns, then we'll certainly investigate it. But you know, it's everybody's got a different opinion as to what unsightly may be. I think we're all generally on the same page, but we have to look at it in a very black and white lens when we do our investigations.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Director Acton.
Thank you. I noticed that Area B has a lot of under zoning. So I'm wondering what kind of issues are cropping up in the area with 13 of them.
So generally speaking, the same issues are fairly consistent throughout the electoral areas. You know, a lot of it is dwelling in RVs, which we've kind of sectioned off just to illustrate the increased amount of concerns we have with that. Non-permitted suites, structure setbacks, and non-conforming home-based business activities. So there's really nothing unique in electoral area B. I think that's shared right through all electoral areas.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Director Acton.
Yeah, just to follow up, I guess I'm curious when we're going to see our bylaw review, when that's going to come back. And I can't recall if we talked about the need in the community of more education on just how bylaw works. Because that seems to be a lot of the questions that I get is like, how do they help bring it along? And then, you know, all the questions of, you know, does my name get released? And I think an education would be really important, and just the importance of, I always tell people, if you really care about it, you need to keep following up, because it's not always resolved how they may think it should be. Like you said, the some of them are kind of black and white, so it may not be to their satisfaction.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. I was in touch with our consultant this afternoon, and it looks like the report, I'm hoping, will be put together for the next ESC meeting, but I'm not sure he's going to meet the deadline. And that would further go into your educational piece, because I think we'll see some things come out of that service review that address education in the community. So probably at this point in time, I probably won't comment further on that one.
Okay, thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, a couple of things. First, a comment, then a question. The dwelling in RVs, I'm have some concerns in that I think the numbers that we've got in the report are probably a small fraction of what we have going on in the more rural areas. I'm seeing on social media, I'm seeing ads for not only people encouraging folks to come and park RVs on their property for a pad rent fee, but also people putting ads on social media looking for those opportunities. So you know, we're having an affordable housing crisis, and I think it's just going to get worse. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what staff are doing on that front. Or are you waiting for direction from us? And the second question I have is, I know in the past you've reported cases that were carried over from the year before, cases that were closed, new cases, and that sort of information. Any chance that we'll get a picture of that kind of information in an upcoming report, or can that be reported out to us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as RVs, you know, we are aware of what is reported to us. These are complaint driven, and that's what we have captured as far as our investigations. And I think Director Morrison has a very valid point. It's on the increase, that's for sure. Apologize for not including any open files at this time, and moving forward, maybe we can include that in our report to capture that. The current year-end report does compile the total calls for the year, as you can see, where we had 298 calls for service for 2021. So, but moving forward, we will capture the open files as well.
Great. Okay. Seeing no further questions, or no, sorry, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, Mr. McDonald and staff do a great job. Thank you very much. They've always been very, very responsive. And one of the things that makes my ears prick up is the term consultant and deadlines. Mr. McDonald, how much latitude do you give the consultants when they have a deadline to meet? Because certainly during my consultancy days, there was very little latitude given. Is there a period where you say, come on, guys, you need to get a move on? Basically, it's a general question of how much how much latitude do they have before they come forward with the report that they were supposed to present?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I actually interestingly posed that to our consultant today because I'm sure as the rest of you, I'm quite anxious to get the report. So we do have deadlines for next ESC meeting, and he had promised me by next week, and I'm worried about missing that deadline. So my concern is that it'll be the first week of March, but I'm doing my best to get it for the next meeting. But unfortunately, at this point, I don't know he's going to meet that deadline.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. You might also add that Rotten Director for Area C is also asking the same questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, don't see any other questions. Thank you, staff, for answering those. And yep, there we go, virtual applause. I think we'll have a 10-minute break before we move on, if that's in agreement. So I'll see everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So just before we move to the next item, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, and I had mentioned it, I believe, in a board meeting, that we were sent in our mail CVRD, what you need to know in CVRD, and it had to do with RVs, dog licensing, and all of that. So I just wanted to thank staff for that once again after that last presentation. It's important for communication to the public, and that was one way of doing it. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Thank you. And it did prompt me to go get our dog license renewed, which I had forgotten. So it works. Okay, so Ms. Harrison, should we turn to the next item on the agenda, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is R6. It's a report from the Planning Strategic Initiatives Division regarding CVRD Manufactured Home Park Bylaw number 4367 and Redevelopment Policy 2022. And this was referred from the July 14th, 2021 board meeting. There is a recommendation before you with 3 points, but I believe staff wishes to provide a presentation.
Very good. Nice to see you, Ms. Garnett. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so if it's okay, we'll share my screen.
Yes, please do. Yeah,
All
we can
right.
see that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this report is with respect to CVRD Manufactured Home Park Bylaw number 4367 and the Redevelopment Policy 2022. And as Ms. Harrison said, it was referred from July 14th meeting. The purpose of this report is really to replace the CVRD's Manufactured Home Park Bylaw number 275, which dates back to 1978, and to replace it with bylaw number 4367. The Mobile Home Park Bylaw 4367 provides the requirements for the construction and layout of manufactured home parks, and it's a bylaw enabled under Section 298 of the Local Government Act. The updated bylaw 4367 modernizes language and definitions. It removes ultra-virus content, and it provides general updates such as current legislation references. And there is an explanatory table of changes that provides the rationale for each of the changes from bylaw 275 to 4367, and that's attachment F in your package. The second point on the slide is to update the CVRD's Manufactured Home Park Redevelopment Policy. So this policy provides guidance to the board when considering applications to redevelop land that is currently a manufactured home park, and it's intended to provide the tenants of a mobile home park with notification and assistance when the land is proposed to be redeveloped. Bylaw 4270, the HOCP, removed all the manufactured home park policies, and some of those policies have been moved into this 2022 redevelopment policy. This policy was also updated to clarify the jurisdiction of the board when working to protect the interests of existing tenants of a manufactured home park. So this, as I noted, this report or the bylaw itself and the policy was brought to the committee and the board, and at the July 14th meeting, it was referred back to staff for a review of requirements under the Section 15 water supply. And so we have undertaken an analysis of those water supply requirements. And just to clarify, it was Section 13, so that's why you see the change from the two slides. We reviewed the water supply requirements in light of subdivision bylaw number 1215 and the Works and Servicing Bylaw number 4331, which is, I believe, at third reading. And our overall conclusions were that the bylaw 4376 water supply requirements are not redundant or inconsistent with either bylaw 1215 or 4331 and should be retained. And it's important in this analysis to understand that manufactured home park development does not necessarily go through the subdivision process. And that's really where the water supply requirements come into effect for the subdivision bylaw 1215 or 4331. And so 4367 really defaults to components of the building and plumbing code for water supply, and therefore that content is important to be retained. And therefore, our final conclusion, our recommendation is to bring the bylaw 4367 to the board for first and second reading, to waive a public hearing in lieu of a notification, and to approve the redevelopment policy upon adoption of bylaw 4367. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that succinct summary. I'll turn to the committee. I see Director Yanni DiNardo and then Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just moving the recommendation.
Okay. Do you have a seconder? Yes, been seconded. All right. Anyone, any questions or comments? Director Smith?
Yes, I have a fair list here, so maybe I'll just get started and then you can stop me as I get. Manufactured home parks are definitely something that has caused an issue in Area G. It goes back in time. It was really a sad situation, and I would never like to see that repeated any place in BC. So I have some other questions. Where do modular homes fit in? I see that there's single wide and double wide, and there's no measurements indicating how wide a single wide is or how wide a double wide is. And so I'm just going to start with, where do the modular homes fit in to a manufactured home park?
Okay.
I'll start with that one.
Thank you. Through the chair, there are definitions in the proposed bylaw 4367 that clarify that this bylaw applies to manufactured home parks or manufactured homes. And so it does not include a modular home. I believe there are different standards that these types of units have to meet, and so it would not apply to modular homes.
So the question then becomes, where do modular homes fit in to our whole picture then? Are they only allowed on a parcel?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so they would be considered to be a single family dwelling that would be permitted within a single family dwelling zone.
Follow up, Director Smith?
Yes. So there is no measurements of what a single wide is or what a double wide is. It just sort of indicates that it can't exceed 35% of the parcel. So I'm just wondering if there is a measurement for what a single wide is and what a double wide is. Or is it just, it doesn't matter how wide they are as long as it's just the 35% coverage? No, it doesn't exceed that?
Yeah, I think, yes, thank you. Now, I think that specificity of the size of the manufactured home is not provided in the bylaw. I'm not sure how else to sort of answer that question. I don't know, perhaps Mr. McDonald could step in to speak to the very specifics of the different kinds of units.
Mr. McDonald.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in fact, I had to quickly look up to see what the size of a single wide was, so I'm just looking online. So it seems to appear that they're about 18 feet or less in width, and I take it a double wide is double that. So I realize it's not specified in the bylaw, but yeah, typically I think you're seeing 18 feet or less in width.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if I have more questions.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I don't see any other directors. So
I noticed there's the buffer area, and the buffer area is that basically a common area for everyone, and that the even though the manufactured home isn't in in that buffer zone, and that they can't build something in the buffer zone, can someone take and create their own backyard with a patio, brick patio or something in the buffer zone? It's not quite clear there on that buffer zone.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair now, I'm just looking at the buffer and recreational areas requirements. The buffer is really intended to, in my opinion, to provide a buffer to adjacent land uses. It's in effect a setback area. It does say that no manufactured home area or owner's residential plot may be located in the buffer area. No building or structure may be erected or placed. I'm looking in section 9 of the proposed 4367. Is that helpful?
Well, it is, but I wonder about people who then sort of claim that area, say that's behind them, and they build a concrete pad that then becomes part of their backyard. Is there any way of restricting that? So is the intent for people to be able to walk around in that area as common property in that buffer? Or is there the possibility of the manufactured homes being able to use that as like a patio or create something back there?
Thank you. The way I read the proposed bylaw is that it's not intended for personal residential use. There are to be no recreational or amenity areas. So it is, in my view of it, interpretation of it, is sort of more of a common space. And if there was a non-compliance issue or someone constructing something, then, you know, it would be on a complaints basis brought to the CVRD, and they would be looking to assess compliance with that.
Thank you. So my next question would be, under the owner's residential lot, can that include a stick-built house? And does it have to be a manufactured home?
Thank you very much. So section 11 speaks to owner's residential plot, and I believe it is it may be a traditionally built home.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Director Smith. I see if any other directors want to get in, let me know. Other than that, these are good questions. Carry on.
Okay, so the policy is where the issue began for Area G. It says the application to rezone the land use. And what happened here in Saltaire was that there was a house on the property, and the owner purchased the property. They removed all the tenants in the manufactured homes, and based on, they said they were going to live in the house that was on the property. All the people were removed. The owner never lived in the house and never rezoned, and turned around and said, this is zone manufactured home park, and now I want manufactured home park. And so because it wasn't rezoned and he had already removed all the people, the tenants, then this policy failed them. And to me, we need to make sure we get it right, because is the word rezone land use because that's where I think it fell down, and then it damaged many families and caused a lot of heartache. And we need to know, how can we solve that rezone to be something that captures everything. Like you can't just move, say you're going to move in the house, and under the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act, he could remove all the people, which was fine in his mind, but it failed. We at the CVRD, the policy failed those people. So we don't want to see that happen again. And so what would be the correct wording instead of rezone? Like, could it be rezone or other, I'm sure you know what I'm trying to get at, Allison. So maybe you can help guide us in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, I'll try to answer that question. And you're correct that the policy was not a tool to be used in that particular situation because there was no rezoning application. But I think what's important to understand is that the board has discretionary approval when there is a rezoning application. And that's where the board has the ability to consider a policy such as this, which is really intended to protect the interests of the tenants of a mobile home park. But in the situation you're describing, if the existing zoning already allows that development to take place, then the board does not have a role in that technical approval process. And so that's, in my opinion, this policy is really only intended to address when the board has discretionary approval. And we have tried to tighten up the policy in order to try to respect and protect the interests of those existing tenants, but keeping in mind the limits of the CVRD's jurisdiction. We cannot ask for more information, or we cannot ask for the relocation of those tenants. The previous 2008 policy stipulated a requirement that to see the tenants relocated, and that is beyond the CVRD's authority to request as part of a rezoning application, but we can ask for information relating to that. And that's an important clarification. Clarification of the CVRD's jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
So I still have concerns because a lot of the manufactured home zones indicate it can be basically a single family dwelling. And I think or a manufactured home park. And that's where you, under the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act, you can remove all the people because you're just going to live on the land in the house, because a single family dwelling is actually allowed on that parcel, even though it's a zoned manufactured home park. And so then that turns and twists the rezoning, because the person doesn't need to rezone it to be living on a manufactured home park in a home and everybody gone. So maybe, thanks, Coralie. Thank you.
I see Ms. Breen has popped up. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, directors again. In the instance as we understand it in Area G and any other ones that you're referencing, it would mean that those zones that currently permit both a single family home and a manufactured home should be changed to avoid that situation. That's the only way to avoid it. If it's permitted already as a use, if that zone permits both, then someone who wants to redevelop already has that as a permitted use. So that's the way to avoid it, is the actual zone would need to be amended in those instances where that's desirable. And that will be reviewed in the modernized zoning bylaw process.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. So just to review, so it looks to me, so the recommendation we have before us is to go to first and second reading and then public hearing. And the third part is about the policy, which will be approved but not come into effect until the bylaw is actually adopted. So it does sound like we have some time to fine tune some of the concerns, Director Smith, that you're bringing up. I see if I've got a nod from Ms. Breen. Is that the way, am I reading that properly? There's still time.
Just a clarification, if I may, the public hearing would be waived in lieu of a notice in the newspaper.
Oh, I'm sorry, I see that now, okay. And in any case, we do have time before third and final adoption. Okay, Director Smith.
I appreciate all the other directors' time and my continuation on this topic. So basically, the only way that we can protect manufactured home park tenants at this time is if the zoning was amended to remove the single family portion of that manufactured home park. Is that what you're indicating? And that we'll only be doing that once we finish with MOCP that goes into the zoning that could still be a couple of years down the road? Can you clarify that, please? Thank you.
Through the chair, that's partially correct. Immediately, it would be amending the current zones with both uses permitted to only permit manufactured home parks. It still doesn't prevent someone applying for a rezoning. It doesn't prevent that. But it does prevent an immediate change of use without a rezoning application being applied for. If there was any concerns about leaving this one without some immediate amendments, it would require zoning bylaw amendments because it's likely that the zoning bylaw would probably not come through for any kind of public hearing or consultation for 18 months to 2 years.
Okay, thank you. So to go to Director Morrison.
Thank you. And this is through to staff, and I've been doing my best to hang on every word from our staff on this one, but I do know that I can see where Director Smith is going with this, but there's been discussions with staff on zoning before around this issue of pulling out the single family dwelling permitted use, and I think it's in just about every zone that we have, or it has been. And I know that, for instance, in regards to forestry zoning, it has been in there, and the rationale has always been that if someone buys a piece of private managed forest land and they should choose to live on the property and operate it as a privately owned woodlot, that they should have that ability to do that. But we're also finding that we've discussed before that pulling that ability to have a single family dwelling as a permitted use within that zone could be problematic. So I see where Director Smith is going with this, is to say that, hang on, wait a minute, single family use in this zone may not be appropriate. And I'm not sure that there may be unintended consequences in doing this. And I'll just relate a really quick story. When the Honeymoon Bay Elementary School was sold by the school district to an individual, even though it was a public use school, single family dwelling was a permitted use, which enabled the individual to put a kitchen in the building, live in it for a year, sell it after a year, and because of his occupancy as a principal residence for a year, there was no capital gain derived from that, from a taxation purpose. So I think there's a lot more to this than just saying, let's pull that use out of various different zones that we have in our bylaw, because there's a lot of different layers involved in doing a move like that. Thank you. Comment from staff?
Green?
Yes, through the chair, staff would agree with that. And so we're not suggesting that happens, but we would suggest that it's comprehensively reviewed as part of the modernized zoning bylaw process, because it'll be particular to each community and even particular within communities.
Here. Okay, Director Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know it's going to be a slow process, but I think we'll eventually get there. And under the guidance of Ms. Breen and Ms. Garnett, one of the questions I was wondering about with manufactured home parks, we have quite a few that are non-conforming. And how do they fit into this bylaw and this policy? Thank you.
Who would like to take that one? Scarlett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's a non-conforming use, then my understanding it would default to the sections of the Local Government Act that regulate non-conforming uses. So to the extent that the use can continue but cannot expand. And then if it's damaged to a certain degree, then it could not be sort of rebuilt. So that would be my answer, and Ms. Breen can add to that if she'd like.
Oh, okay. It's a good question. Okay, Director Smith. We're good. Okay. Is there any further questions? We have a motion or recommendation. No one's moved it yet. There we go, Director Nicholson.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It has been moved and seconded.
Oh, is it? Okay. Sorry, it's been a while. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Director Morrison.
Sorry, I had one other question through to staff. I hope we've got some of our engineering folks. The one thing that I didn't pick up in here, and I did a lot of reading this past week, but was the implication of the ownership of the services and the servicing around this, in that we have minimum service size for like a sewer system or water system that we tend to want to operate if they get beyond the 50 or 75. So we even require it in some cases. Are we addressing that well enough in here so that, you know, if say we had anything over 50 units needed to be a CVRD owned water system or sewer system, that we have people coming in and applying to do, you know, 48 or 49 units, and that's not what the intent is. We want the consistent, we want to make sure we're providing potable water and reliable, efficient sewer systems when places like this go in. So any thoughts around that?
Scarlett?
Thank you, and through the chair. The requirements for meeting the number of units to meet the definition of community water or sewer system would stay the same. That would exist in the zoning bylaw. So I don't think that there would be a possibility for connection to a community water sewer system. Well, connection to an existing one would be a possibility, but certainly if they didn't meet the definition, then there wouldn't be the system created. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, thank you. Director Nicholson.
I think that's a very interesting point, and that speaks to making sure that these kind of things are within the urban containment boundary.
Okay. Ms. Breen?
Thank you. And also other considerations are the specific zoning density limitations as well.
Okay, thank you. So good discussion. I'm seeing no further questions. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll go to the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is unfinished business. There is none. New business, there is none. Question period, we have no applicants. Closed session, we have no items. Adjournment.
There we go. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.